Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. A few weeks ago, when I was approached to give a keynote here on doing business in Nigeria, I asked myself, I hope I'm not going to be talking to investors, because prior to that session, I'd had the opportunity of traveling to look for investors to invest in InterSwitch. And on that trip, I had a very demoralizing experience. It wasn't to actually do a deal. It was what we called a non-deal roadshow. In other words, I was just going to engage potential future investors to tell them about the company so that they get to know more about us, so that by the time there's need for a deal, we are not totally strangers. And every one of them, this was 2 years ago, told me, Mitchell, we know your company, but Nigeria, no. And they said a lot of things. So why am I here today giving a keynote on doing business in Nigeria? Well, I think if anybody is qualified to give that keynote, I think I'm qualified. And why am I qualified? I started InterSwitch 3 years after NYC. So it's been a 22-year journey. Okay? So we've seen a lot of things. And we've seen it in this market. And the company focusing on Nigeria has been quite successful and has used Nigeria as a flywheel to get it to other countries. So when I talk to you about doing business in Nigeria, please take it seriously, because this is somebody who has experienced and is experiencing most of the things that will matter to you in your business. I understand we have to do this next slide thing. So if you don't mind, just bear with me. Now, just to give you some context, many years ago, I was doing my global CEO program, and we were in Brazil. The very first meeting was at night, and a prof from the business school there did a presentation, and he put up a chart that said something quite interesting, gave a list of the top 15 countries by 2050. And I was shocked to find my country, Nigeria, on that list. There were 4 of us from Nigeria in that class. So we started arguing that how did you get Nigeria to this list? How is it possible? It's not possible. And so on and so forth. So just to make peace, he now said, okay, you know what? Let me take my list down and let me ask you. So he picked on me and said, by any standard, any metric whatsoever, which country do you think will be number 1 by 2050? I said, China. He said, okay, nice. Your number 1 agrees with my number 1. Which country will be number 2? I said, maybe India. He said, oh, interesting. Your number 2 agrees with my number 2. And he said, which country will be number 3? I said, maybe the USA. He said, fantastic. So we agree on the first 3. What about number 4, number 5, and so on and so forth? After number 3, I couldn't imagine. But he asked me a question. What metric did you use to rank the top 3? And I suddenly realized that it wasn't because one was a Christian country, or one was an Islamic country, or one did not believe in God. But I came to the conclusion that my ranking must have been influenced by things I've heard over time. Then he now asked me the question, okay, what do they all have in common? I said, maybe population. He said, good. He said, so what will be the population of Nigeria by 2050? We'll find out. So apparently, there is a connection between your population and your economic growth. I'm not an economist, just like the previous speaker said. I'm an engineer by training. But when you sit down with economists in the room, you listen to accountants and so on and so forth, you begin to learn a few things. So what you have on the screen is the ease of doing business ranking. So if I thought a good place to start is if you want to do business in any country, you want to ask yourself, how easy is it to do business in that country? Unfortunately, our country is not one of the easiest to do business in. So having this kind of conference that talks about doing business in Nigeria is actually very apt, because there are quite a few things that you need to have if you want to survive in an environment where clearly, as you can see, doing business is not one of the easiest at all. But as you can also see from that chart, sometimes you can go up, you can rise, and sometimes you can come down. Next slide, please. Now, I was in a session many years ago where Bismarck Rewana spoke, and he put up this slide. So this is actually his slide that I stole. And this slide basically talks about the economics pocketbook, ranking countries on the basis of being entrepreneurs, meaning that which countries in the world potentially, by default, the citizens are entrepreneurs. Incidentally, Nigeria is number 1 on that ranking. So I'm beginning the case. Take your population, take your spirit of entrepreneurism, okay, and then begin to look at other factors, and they would arrive at something. Next slide, please. I heard the previous speaker talk about inflation and how it can easily run away. It has before. So one of the things I do is whenever there's a problem, quickly I go back into history to find out, has this happened in Nigeria before, and what was done. Most times when I do this, I just tell myself, relax. This one is even small. So if inflation is 31% now, and you are screaming, just know that in this your beloved country, inflation was once at 72. In the 80s and 90s. So there's nothing new. It's only new to you, it's not new to the country. And if you go back and study history, you will learn what companies that survived then did to survive. So if you've always avoided history, it's not a wise thing. Sometimes knowing what has happened in the past prepares you for what is going to happen in the future. Next slide. Of course, Naira dollar wahala. A few months back, I went to my uncle that I grew up with. I said, listen, when we were young, during that SAP IMF loan period, I knew things were very tough because we had to do some structural adjustment at home. For the first time, we started counting how many cubes of sugar you could use. We were rationing things in the house. We avoided bread, which was a staple for breakfast. I went to yam. And at some point, we went to cassava bread. Okay? So things have happened in the past. So I asked him, if you look at what happened then and what we're experiencing now, which one do you think was worse? He said, oh, it was then. So we've not seen anything yet. So again, perspective is very important. So you may think today things are terrible, but just be aware that in the same country, people have experienced it before. People are jackpotting. It's not new. People have jackpot before. When I was growing up, there used to be this advert on telly, Andrew, don't check out. Stay and build your country. Okay, so it's not today. Then they call it check out. Today we call it jackpot, but it's the same thing. Okay, people go, people come. But when this happens, what usually happens? A group of people stay in the country and they benefit from it. Okay? We started InterSwitch in 2002. If you go back and look at that chart on inflation and whatever, you discover that 2002 may not have been the best time to start a business. But that was the time the MTNs of the world came into Nigeria too. Okay? Next slide. Now, despite all of these issues, okay, they tell us that when it comes to mental health, Nigeria is still very decent. I know people will say, where did they get their statistics from? Agreed. But it is what we have. They are saying, despite all this wahala, all these troubles, your resilience appears to be something we need to study, because somehow you guys are able to cope and remain happy despite all the issues. Okay? Next slide. So if you look at the companies on the screen, they all started less than 20 years, maybe 25 years ago. MTN that we're talking about now, everywhere you go, started a few years ago. If you go and look at when they came into Nigeria, it wasn't one of the best times economically. So what brought them to Nigeria? This last December, I came to this landmark and I came to the beach. And I was shocked at what I saw. Okay? So the question is, what are the drivers of those things that are making Indians come to the country that you're all running away from, that are bringing Chinese to your country that you're running away from, that Lebanese are coming in? What are they seeing that we who are here are not seeing? And if they're able to attract funds, I don't think they brought their money in. They are being funded by banks in Nigeria. What are they saying to those banks that will allow a bank fund them and not fund you? Personally, I've never believed that capital is the problem. It is what is your case. Okay? Next slide, please. So, when you want to solve problems, and I keep telling this to young people that I mentor, that nobody cares about if you're making money. They just care about what problem do I have that you are solving for me. I reward you for solving my problem. So if you're in this room, you want to do business in Nigeria, I'm happy to tell you that there are many, many problems. More problems here than anywhere else in the world to solve. And we have the population to benefit from that problem you're solving and then reward you for solving that problem. And I'll give you just one example. InterSwitch. One problem we picked up was, how can we get cash into the hands of Nigerians just in time? We asked this question 22 years ago. Everybody wanted cash. How can you get cash into their hands? ATM. How can you get ATM into Nigeria? Technology. And that was it. What price should they pay for it? Not rocket science. Okay? What is the cost of a loaf of bread? Let's just make the switching fee the cost of a loaf of bread. And there was population, and it grew. There are many more problems we need to solve. The question is, do you see those problems, and are you bold enough to go and solve those problems? And if you look at hierarchy of needs, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, there are many levels of problems. If you want to solve the fundamental issues of life, okay, shelter, food. I heard somebody say it's from Obasanjo Farms. There's a lot of opportunities there. If you want to go into luxury, Nigerians are there waiting for you. So the entire hierarchy of needs, there's a need that you can solve if you come from this country called Nigeria. Next slide, please. But how do you key into this? So I like to talk about perspective. So what you're seeing is some artwork, okay? But the only way to appreciate this artwork is to take a step back. And when you take a step back, you begin to see a totally different picture. And that is what I try to do in life. Whenever there's a big problem, I try to take a step back to understand the bigger picture, then I zero in on the problem. And what I want to do next is to just share with you some perspectives, okay, that you should be aware of if you want to do business in this market. This is the map of the world. This is what we call the political map of the world. This is the way people have told us the world is. And this is the perspective we all have. The truth is that this is very wrong. The map of the world has to be looked at from different lenses, because the lens you use will give you a different perspective and a different problem. Next slide, please. So if you look at the world from a population point of view, so there's this website called worldmapper.org. I'll encourage you to go there. The data is not very accurate, okay, but you will see some historical data that's quite accurate. This is what the map of the world looks like if you use population as the basis. not land mass, population. And you can see that in 2022, that is the population of Nigeria in Africa. So if you want to draw the map of Africa by population, that is what you should be seeing, not what was in the previous map. And they are telling us that by 2100, that is going to be the map of the world. And that is the position of Nigeria. What does that tell you about population? Big. So how are you going to have 300, 400, 500 million people with needs for food, shelter, healthcare, and you can't find a solution? Even if they are paying you 1 naira for your solution, 1 naira times 500 million on a regular basis is a lot of money. Okay? So one thing you must bear in mind when you think about business in Nigeria is the population of Nigeria and population growth. Okay? Next slide, please. This is another perspective. If you want to plot the map of the world by mobile subscriptions, this is what you will have. The map is very different from that of population. So what you'll find here is 3 years, 1990, 2002, around the time when the MTNs, the Econet Wireless in those days, and Glo came in, and 2015. And you can see the way the map of the world has changed. For mobile subscriptions, in 1990, Nigeria was like a dot. Today, when you come down to 2015 down there, Nigeria is one of the biggest on the continent. But don't forget, if you go back to look at the map on inflation that I showed before, okay, you will notice that that period of 2002 perhaps wasn't the best time for anybody thinking of doing business. And one of the arguments they had in Nigeria, from what I gathered, was that there was this argument about what is the real pent-up demand in Nigeria. And all the GSM pros will tell you that they underestimated the real potential of the country. Okay? So always have that in the back of your mind. Next slide, please. Now, internet usage. This is what the map of the world looks like if you plot it based on internet usage. Again, you can see that Nigeria, South Africa, quite dominant. But you cannot talk about the dominance of Nigeria without looking at population. Because I do not believe on a GDP per capita basis we are richer than South Africa, for example. So there must be a play to population here. So what am I saying to summarize? That when you think of doing business in Nigeria, there are 3 growth factors you must consider. One, clearly, you by now would have agreed with me, is population. You cannot do from population. You cannot have 500 million people and the country will fail. It's not possible. The world will never allow the country to fail. So if you're one of those thinking that Nigeria is going to be a failed society, it won't happen. Okay? So rather than worrying about whether it's going to be a failed society, you should be asking yourself, what can I plug into and create value for myself and for my country? That's the truth. You see this industry you're talking about, we started with 200 million naira. We've never borrowed since then. In the recent of it, it was 200 million and the patronage of Nigerians that grew the company. So when you hear that we raise money, it is somebody selling to somebody else and cleaning out. It's not that money is coming to the business. The monies we make from our customers is what we have used to grow the business. Okay? Start small, but recognize that the opportunity to scale actually does exist in your country. Demography. A youthful population is a very interesting population to have, and we have that in our favor, and you should not ignore it. Okay? And then, of course, this issue of pent-up demand. There's hardly anything you want to do in Nigeria where there isn't enough demand waiting. The question is, which areas are you plugging into, and do you have the expertise to play in that particular area? Next slide. So, when I heard that a lot of multinationals were leaving the country, I called a friend of mine in the bank. But I heard that your bank funded this company that just took over this. So why did you not tell me now? The point is the fact that one person is leaving does not mean that the need has gone. It's an opportunity for you and I to plug in and fill that need. I may be leaving because my business model is wrong, but if you are local, you will find a local business model that works. What I call local best practice. Okay? Some years ago, I had some people visit the country from Harvard, and they came to our office, and I told them, please, when you meet Professor Michael Porter, tell him what we learned in business school was fantastic, Porter's 5 forces, but please let him know that the forces in Nigeria are more than 5. There are more forces here that we are dealing with, but somehow we have the resilience. And there are people who know the continent very well who will tell you that don't worry about the fact that people are leaving. As people are leaving, others are going to come. And as I don't want to mention it, those who have left already, we have seen people coming to replace them because the demand is there. If there's one thing I like to drop is the fact that local problems require local solutions. I was telling someone a few days ago that if you are sitting in the US or anywhere else and you're told to propose to government how to solve the problem of traffic congestion in Lagos, what will you say? It should never cross your mind that government fix all the potholes, that this traffic is being created by lack of free flow of traffic. If you know queuing theory, you know easily that fix the roads, make sure there are no bumps here and there, let everybody be moving at even speed. You will get to your destination in less than 30 minutes. It's not because the road is not wide enough or whatever. It's just that the road is not even. So all this stop here, speed, stop is what's creating the traffic. But that will never cross your mind if you don't live in Lagos to see that there are potholes, because some of us may be in countries where there are no potholes. So the solution for traffic is something else. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make is that there are local problems. Think of local solutions, and those local solutions can look for people who live in the local environment. Okay? It's the point I'm trying to bring out there. I'd like to round up with some strategic planning assumptions, just 5 of them. Initially, there were 10, but I know I will not have the time for 10. And sometimes it's not the number, but just put the important ones forward. This is GDP growth for some parts of the world. So you can see where your continent falls into. So actually, there's some sort of acceleration despite all the problems that we have. Next slide. This particular study by PwC struck me when I first heard about it, and I want to spend some time on it. Remember I told you that during my Global CEO program, a prof said that Nigeria will be one of the top 15, and I didn't believe him. A few years ago, I saw this PwC report that says that by 2050, this will be the top 10 countries in the world. And as you can see, sometimes power does change hands. But there's what we call the VPN connection on the right-hand side. Keep your eyes on Vietnam, Philippines, and Nigeria, what I call the VPN connection. Your country, they say, will move from number 22 position to number 14. Look at this list. By 2050, all the countries you are jackpot into, where are they on that list? So some of us may be looking at today's reality and making a move that will hurt us 15, 20 years from now. Moves that will hurt your families because you didn't see into the future. Some of the places you are running to are already having problems, but you don't see it. And where you are running from is actually creating opportunities for you to grow, and you are not seeing it. So there's one perspective I would like to change today for most of you in the room is there's nothing wrong with your country. Okay? There are problems, no doubt about it. But there are problems everywhere else. For those of you who have traveled, you know. It's just that it's a different kind of problem. The question is, which problem do you want to deal with? Okay? Next one. Next slide, please. I use this a lot. I just finished a negotiation a few weeks back where I crashed the price that a vendor came with by 70%. You know how I did it? I just took a chart, GDP per capita of some countries, where the vendors came from, the US, and I showed them Nigeria. I said, we are a very loud but poor country. In fact, my minister said that 5% of us, only 5% of us have over 500,000 naira in our account. If you divide that by the exchange rate today, it gives you a sense that every other person is below this. So this thing you want to sell to me to take to my country, who's going to pay for it? When you are in a country that is very rich and you have a population of 10 million people, you can price for value. But when you are coming to a country where we have 200 million people, we think we'll get to 400 million, you can't come and price with value. We are too poor to pay. Price for volume. 1 naira times 500 will give you something. But if you come to say, I want to charge you 500 times, you won't get it. And they saw the logic. And I told them, we are in the tropical savannah. We are not in Silicon Valley. Business is different. The people are different. So if you want to do business in my country, these are the conditions to win. And they bought it. But if you don't have that data in front of you, you go and negotiate things, and you come back and say business is not doing well in Nigeria. You just fail to understand the structure of your country. Forget all this noise. We are very poor people. The problem is that when you say you have 5% of your people having 500,000, 5% of 100 million is what? It's 5 million. Of 200 million is what? 10 million. That is the population of some countries. So a small portion of your country, of your people, is actually one country on its own. But they are a small part of the population. And if you're going to plan, you have to plan for everybody, not for that small part. So if you have that perspective, even your negotiations with your foreign partners will change. And you can create a lot of value for yourself that you can make further down the line. There's what I call the toothpick theory. It was attributed to me, but it was not based on any research. I think somebody was interviewing me, and I just gave an illustration. When I saw the report, they call it Mr. Elegbe's toothpick theory. But let me tell you what the theory says. I'm saying, when you're looking for data, don't look for data that has been published alone. Look for data on the streets. And that data on the street comes from the culture and behavior of people. I'll give you an example. Most Nigerians, when they finish eating, what do? They look for toothpick. Why? They even take toothpick as takeaway. Okay? So if you want to get a sense for demand for food in a country, maybe you want to go and look at toothpick consumption. Because if you're looking for other data, you may not see it. So the point I'm trying to make is, what is that proxy data that you can use in the absence of real data? Because one complaint we all have is, there's no data in Nigeria, there's no data in Nigeria. True, there's no data. I'm not going to create it. But what is that proxy for that data that you're looking for? So if you want to look at food in Nigeria, maybe you want to look at how many toothpicks they are consuming. That data may be there, but you may not know how many, whatever of meat they are going to consume. But you know that there's a connection between toothpick usage and eating of meat. You don't eat pounded yam without meat and go up looking for toothpick. So toothpick consumption is a sign that something happens, you chew something, and something is stuck somewhere. Okay? Next slide. Tropical savanna. This is very apt in my business, fintech, but let me just give that example. A lot of companies have failed because they are depending on monies to raise one fund after another fund after another fund. That works very well in Silicon Valley. But when in the tropical savanna, you only have one chance. Don't waste it. You may raise your fund once and not be able to raise the second one. I told you 2 years ago, I went around the whole world talking to investors. Everyone told me they're not investing in Nigeria. Not now. A lot of my fintech partners did not know because they've not gone on that trip. But I knew 2 years before that money is not going to come. I didn't understand what was happening to the economy, but this was real life information. But if you had just raised money 2 years ago, you should have known that this money may be the last one you can raise in the next 5 years. So how you use it is important. Another point to note, you don't give a poor man something for free, and then the next day you want to come and charge him for it. He will insult you. He will tell you, you should have left me where I was before. Just like the Israelites said, leave us where we were. So this idea that I can win market share by giving you stuff to use for free, then one that can monetize it, you better be sure your unit economics is right, because you may never be able to monetize it. And that is why a lot of fintechs today will never become profitable. So what am I saying? When you're in the tropical savannah, getting to profitability is the most important thing you must know to do. And what that basically means is that your unit economics, you must get it right from day one. If you miss that, it's better to do something small, become profitable with it, and begin to scale sustainably than go and do something very big, burn cash, get all the customers. The day you want to ask them to pay small, they'll run away, which is what you are seeing in most times. There's a lot you can learn on the streets of Lagos. So when I drive around, I look at people, I look at behaviors. Do not ignore the lessons on the streets of your country. The MBAs are important. They're necessary, but they are not sufficient. What kills most businesses are the things you did not learn in school, but that you have to deal with, especially if you went to school abroad, because most of the examples and cases you did have no relevance with your local environment. Next slide. Control your value chain. This is the trajectory of InterSwitch. No, the next one. Since inception. Because, the previous one. Yes, stay here. This is our trajectory. You see that peak. It happened in March last year. That was the effect of cash not being available. Between you and I did not do any extra work. I sat in my office one day. It was March. I woke up. Transactions went up. No work for me. But my system was able to carry it. But what this told me is that there's still pent-up demand. That if we eliminate cash, only 1 month of activity, all of you knew how to go online. We did not advertise. We did not do anything. You just went online. That demand is still there, which supports by earlier talk about pent-up demand. Okay, next slide. Stop here. No business will have permanent and consistent growth. So the solution is you start one product. When it is doing well, it's the time to begin to invest for your next product, not when it's going to decline. So what I'm trying to show you here is that 3 different products, 3 different growth trajectory, but when you compound all of them, they show you consistent growth. The chart to the right-hand side is true about InterSwitch. In 2009 and 10, we started experiencing serious fraud, magnetic stripe card. I recall I was in camp during one of the Easter breaks when I started getting messages that what's going on here, that there's a lot of fraud. So somehow the fraudsters had figured out how to compromise magnetic stripe cards. But 2 years before, we had started moving to EMV. Our system was ready, but the market was not ready. So one day, next slide, I think that should be on the next slide. The central bank came up. Next slide, please. Okay, because of, let me just try around up. There's a slide that shows something from the central bank, a letter that says, within 1 month, we must shut down everything magnetic stripe and move to, this one, and move to cheaper pin. 1 month. That 1 month, we lost 30 million customers. What saved us? The product that was to replace that one we were told to shut down was started 2 years earlier. It was there. It didn't pick up. But the moment regulation said shut down, it picked up. That product is what you call Verve today. And Verve has over 60% market share. What am I trying to say to you guys? If you want to do business in Nigeria, there are going to be a lot of things that will disrupt your business. You cannot go with one narrow focus, which is what sometimes you hear in your business schools. You have to have multiple products, because if you don't control that value chain, when the shock comes, the shock can destroy you. And a lot of companies that are not surviving because those shocks do come, but they did not build that resilience into their business model. Next slide. I think I'll round up with this. So in summary, go to the next one. Yeah, this is very important. This is my view of Nigeria. There are rules, but nobody's going to enforce those rules for you. So it's good to play by the rules. Okay? But sometimes you can change the rules of the game. So if the rule says when you are playing table tennis, the ball must not get to the floor. So it's either you know how to use the bat or you have to know how to move the table. It works. And to me, this is the way I describe doing business in Nigeria. If you go by the traditional ways of doing things, you will miss out, because the people you are dealing with, your competition, are not thinking conventionally. It is not normal to be in a lot of difficulty and they are telling you that your mental health is one of the best in the world. You cannot be having all these experiences and they are telling you that one of the happiest countries in the world. Where did your happiness come from? All these kids we are seeing that's making all of us laugh. The people who are creating them are in abject poverty. How come their poverty did not overtake them, but they're able to make all of us laugh? So the average Nigerian is not your normal kind of person. And in looking at your business model, you have to think about this too. So one of my favorite quotes in InterSwitch, and my people know this, is when the facts change, I change my mind. What will you do? Because things are always changing. I've had to go to my staff to say, gentlemen and ladies, we are moving to the north. The next day I come and I say, sorry guys, we are going to the south. That's how MD, are we doing guesswork now? I say, no, the facts have changed. I'm not ashamed to tell you my decision yesterday was a wrong decision. I'd rather tell you I made the wrong decision. Let's move the right direction. And that is the way you should look at your business too. You are complaining. A lady I'm mentoring, she's into fashion, called me a few days ago and she was in tears. I said, what is it? She said, my business is dead. I said, how come? She said, Mitchell, dollar. Then I said, and I'm going to close with this. I said, a few days ago, somebody told me that they went to an exhibition in Germany, pharmaceuticals, and they discovered that there are 3 things that they need in Germany: moringa and 2 other products. And these things grow in the wild in Nigeria. People are looking for things to import from us. So there's export opportunity in a sector. And you're in a sector where you need dollars. So what stops you from pivoting and adding a part to your business where you can also export easily, get the dollars you need to sustain this other business? That is what I'm doing in InterSwitch. I've gone to Germany to tell my guys in InterSwitch Germany, you cannot be a cost center anymore. Country hard. You have to become a profit center. I've opened an office in the US. I'm trying to convince my board to open one in Canada, in the UK. Everybody go and hustle. This dollar thing is not easy. We have to look for ways to make enough dollars to carry our dollar cost. When you begin to see exchange rate losses of 7 billion, 10 billion, nobody needs to tell you that it's time to begin to think of other things. So the facts will always change when you're in the tropical savannah. I should be ready to change also. Thank you.